Today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom!
It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Hello, and thank you for joining me for this episode where my guest, an ER doc who is bros with Dr. Oz, gives us some practical, actionable mom hacks from her new book that's aptly titled Mom Hacks. So I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, but Brandy, you hate hacks. So yes, this is mostly true. I am not a fan of hacks most of the time, but Dr. Darria's hacks passed my bullshit detector, which is not an easy thing to do. So on this episode, she even brings up how I grilled her at first when we were talking, and I thought I had scared her off, but her reason for writing this book hooked me, honestly. So keep listening for some laughs and for some hacks you can start using immediately that will help you leverage your inherent laziness at last. Carve out time in the morning for yourself, outsmart your picky eaters, and so much more on today's episode. Okay, today I would like to welcome to the podcast Dr. Darria Long-Gillespie, who has recently written a book called Mom Hacks. Welcome, Darria.
Brandy, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
I have to be really honest with you. When I first saw the title of your book, I did a huge eye roll because I think people know me as somebody who hates hacks. But I really only hate hacks that are like, instead of buying the thing, it takes you like 17 hours to create something out of trash. And that's not what your book is. So I just want people out there who are like, what is Brandy doing talking about hacks? I thought she hated them. Well, we're just going to be clear about not these kind of hacks. Yeah. In fact, your hacks I thought were brilliant. And as we get talking, I want to talk about some of my favorites and some of your favorites, but tell us a little bit about your book and what it is.
Absolutely. And yes, Brandy, I love that when we first started messaging, you were like, hold up, because I don't trust hacks. So you better tell me about it and prove the case for your book, which I loved because you are defending your audience to make sure that you're not giving them anything bad. So,
thank you. I went back and forth about that, but I really, at the end of the day, I really feel like I have to be true to that. I have to be a Gestapo about bullshit.
Yes.
For my people. So I appreciate, and I was so happy that your answer when I like pressed you on like, well, hey, if this is about self-care and about how like we should be doing all this stuff ourselves, like I'm not really into it, but I was so happy and I loved your response. So yes, keep telling us what it's about.
The BS Gestapo, you should get a badge for that. So really the bottom line for why I started writing this book is, Brandy, I'm an emergency room doctor at my core. Underneath the television and everything else that I do, I am ER doctor first. And I had always had this feeling as an ER doctor that whatever comes through those doors in the ER, whether it's a woman in labor or somebody having a heart attack or a car accident, I've got this. I can handle it. But then I became a patient myself. I developed a really bad autoimmune arthritis in residency. And then later I became a mom and I felt suddenly like I did not have that feeling of I've got this in my life. And I looked at my other mom friends and we didn't, my patients who were moms. And so we were very much more like,
none of us have this.
No, we were like, I don't got this. Is that a thing? And so I kind of started to look back and say, what can I do? What is that mentality? What is that skill set? How do I create a way for moms and women and everybody to, in their own daily lives, feel like I've got this?
Yeah, we need you. Yes. And one of the things that you said to me when we were talking back and forth that I was just like, okay, you are my people, is you said something about how you were mad that society just seemed to think it was okay that motherhood seemed to cost a woman her health.
Okay, now hold on. Let me grab my soapbox for a second so I can get up on top of it because I'm going to, yes. So where this came from, and just to back up a little bit and just to tell the story of like how this mentality developed, I was an intern and suddenly one morning I woke up and my joints were swollen, my feet, my hands, I couldn't walk. Brandy, I had gone from running 3 miles a day to I couldn't physically stand because I was in so much pain. So I'd pull up the garbage can with a lid and just sit on that. And so they eventually diagnosed me with psoriatic arthritis and they put me on injection medications. I was giving myself shots twice a week and I was was told that pretty much that was the way it was going to be. So I started to do some research and I started to make some lifestyle changes. And I'll never forget somebody looking at me. It was the dad of a friend. And he said, that'll never work. And it worked. You know, I made a lot of changes. And over the course of a couple of years, I eventually weaned off my medication. And I've not been on it in 7-8 years now. Now, again, caveat, I'm a Western trained physician. I am not anti-medication in any way. I prescribe it. I think it's wonderful. But I think in my case and in many cases, especially with women in chronic health problems, our lifestyle statistics show play 80% of the role. So in my case, changing that made a big difference. So I say that because then fast forward 4 or 5 years, I'm pregnant and I get that same message of, you know, this is the way it's going to be now that you're a mom. One friend said, oh, you'll never exercise once you're a mom. And you hear that. You'll never eat well. You'll never sleep well. All of these different things. And the statistics hold that up, in fact. And I wasn't sure what was worse, like the fact that the statistics were so bad or the fact that everybody seemed okay with this. That like, this is the way it is for motherhood. Sorry.
Right.
You know, when I heard that same message, I was like, you know what? I figured this out before. What did I do with my arthritis? How did I solve for that? How can I use my same ER doctor problem solving mentality? And how can I create something for moms? And that's where this came from, was saying like, no, I'm not going to accept that. No, there is something better. Like, we solved how to be able to pee in space. We can figure this out. This is not a hard thing.
So these things that are in your book, these are tried and tested things that you have done to prove that motherhood doesn't have to be the thing that everybody says.
Yes, exactly. And moms, we don't have time to use the bathroom in private. So I knew that women didn't want some 300-page tome of here's the entire life overhaul you need to do to be a healthy mom, or the have it all guide, whatever have it all even means nowadays. So what I said, what are the tiniest little golden nuggets I can find looking at research and the best of science, but also psychology and holistic health? Like, what are those tiny little things that have a big impact that I can give to people that doesn't increase their work, doesn't increase their decision capacity that they have to do, less willpower, uses our body's automatic cycles to make it actually easier to feel good. And that's where hacks came from.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so just for the listeners, there's 4 different pillars in it: nutrition, fitness, sleep, and resilience. I specifically liked the resilience chapter.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Because I feel like that's where I have a tough time. But so before we kind of get into some of those hacks, what do you think that the listeners need to know about you? What makes you you?
I try to be pretty real in the book. So anybody who reads the book, you probably saw there's like a little bit of goofy in there. There's a little bit of sarcasm in there. And anybody who reads it, I'm constantly quoting song lyrics because I do think in songs. And so they start off the introduction with choose a fight song because it makes such a difference to me on my worst days. Like if I'm stressed or tired or whatever, music really motivates me, and having that soundtrack to my life, as silly as that sounds. So we actually went in and created 5 different mom hacks playlists, which I'm obsessed with. They're all on Spotify, and there's everything from like your workout playlist to your pump up playlist to like cooking playlist.
Can I ask you how much Snoop Dogg is on any of these?
There's actually not, but I'm open to suggestions if you want a little gin and juice.
It's not very kid friendly. Yes, I know. But so I'm curious, what is your song when you're completely alone?
Right now, some of my favorite songs, Sia, of course. She has a song called Never Give Up. There is also, so there's a group called Sly and the Family Stallone, not Sly and the Family Stone, but Sly and the Family Stallone. Now, of course, Brandy, just go to my playlist. You'll find all them, but it's called Role Model. Pretty obsessed with that. And then my other one right now is Try Everything by Shakira, which is on the Zootopia because I am still a mom and most of my movies are Disney. So.
It's funny when you said Sia, I was thinking, oh, is it the one from the Pony movie at the very end? Which I just watched with my daughter. Like the second I think of Sia, I'm like, oh, that's a great song. It's so funny how the soundtrack in our mind and in our lives is so fueled by Disney and our kids. It's like you can't get out of it no matter how hard you try.
No.
Baby Shark is following you. You know, one of the things when you said that your book has a sense of humor, I loved that part of it. And you have some of the best references ever. You have a Chris Farley David Spade reference, which is amazing. And then you also referenced that frigging Blue Blockers song.
Yes. And when we did the audiobook, they actually reached out to me and they wanted me to record the audiobook, which I was surprised by because I was like, I don't sound like Delilah from, you know, what was that radio show? Do you remember Delilah? She had that like beautiful voice. Like, are y'all sure you want me? And they were like, there are so many personal asides here that nobody else can read your book because it's so clearly you talking. I was like, well, okay then.
I do have to say, and I said this to you when we first started recording, you sound so happy and well rested that I'm like, I feel a huge trust. Dr. Darria knows what she's talking about because listen to her. And then I also have a huge distrust, like, you can't be that happy and well rested. No mom is this happy and well rested and an ER doc.
I did not write this book because I am this perfect mom who just has everything figured out and that my children fart roses and that it's all perfect. I wrote this book because I really needed every single hack in this book. I needed it to survive and to be able to take care of my family and to do everything. So I think I have to make it clear from a trust standpoint, it is because I use the hacks, not because I have everything figured out.
Got it. I want to get into these tips that hopefully can help us to be happy and well rested. And I'm curious, what are your top 3 favorite hacks?
Number 1, I think, is some things I do in my morning. So I am not a morning person.
Okay.
I would much rather stay up late and watch Hawaii Five-0 and eat Cheez-Its at 10 or 11 p.m. than go to bed and wake up early. But my daughter is, now that she's a little bit older, I used to run in the afternoon and now she would give me this guilt trip of, oh, you have to go run now. Don't you want to play with us? I thought you loved us and cared about us.
And you're like, refer to hack number 45. Hack number 45 says I can run whenever I want.
Yeah, exactly. No, instead she takes the dagger and she drives it home. So I realized that one of the only ways I was going to get extra time for work and time to like go run or do like a little 5-minute meditation if I wanted to was to do it in the morning. So how to make yourself a morning person. Number 1, I want all of your listeners, if they want to have easier times to wake up. So like, Brandy, do you have trouble waking up in the morning? You feel a little bit like a zombie. You're tired all day. And then when it's nighttime and time to go to sleep again, you can't fall asleep because you're wired.
So I know many moms feel this way, but when my head hits the pillow, I love sleep more than anything in my life.
You're one of those.
I'm one of those. I'm your husband in your book. In your book, when you're like, I kind of hate my husband because he just falls asleep. I'm like, oh, that's me. So yes to the morning's zombiness, especially when a small human being is screaming my name earlier than I wanted them to.
So you can still benefit from this. So the very first thing I want everybody to do the minute they wake up is I want them to get bright light. We often don't try to do that because it hurts. You know, if somebody gets a bright light, maybe for a moment being like, I hate you, mom hacks. Right. But here's why. Most of us really, our body clocks and our circadian rhythm are off in today's world because of our erratic sleep schedules and the crazy things we do late at night. Our body clock just like doesn't have any effing idea what time it's supposed to be and when we're supposed to wake up and go to bed. So you really have to reset that. So the way to do it is sync up your wake up time with the time light hits your eyes. It's like pressing both buttons on your iPhone at the same time, syncs everything together. So 1, it shuts down your melatonin production. So you suddenly feel more energized and less of that zombie state.
Okay.
2, since it's reset your body clock, now your body knows, oh, so I'm supposed to fall asleep about 16 hours from now. I'm going to plan for that. So your bedtime sleeping is easier. And tomorrow morning will be easier because now your body is, okay, melatonin shut down. This must be when we're supposed to wake up.
Okay, time out for a second. What if your kids get up at 5 o'clock when it's still dark out?
So that's when you use either your bright alarm clock or your phone or bright bathroom lights.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing. I'm awake before it's light outside. So get that bright light. You will notice it the first day, and then you will really notice it starting like day 3, 4, or 5 when suddenly you're like, oh, I'm feeling more awake. And it doesn't mean that you're still like, la, the hills are alive and it's 5 a.m. I'm thrilled. But it makes it less of a decision and it's more of just a body's automatic process. So it's taking something off your plate.
Oh, I love that.
So,
okay, got it.
Another thing that I think makes a huge difference, and again, a lot of people are like, oh, how do you do the ER and write a book and you run regularly?
Yes.
And again, the response is, no. I write a book and I work in the ER and do those things because I run regularly. If I do not run, I am not good. I would have these writer's blocks and I would just have to go for a run every once in a while. And sometimes it's just like a short run. But I think a lot of moms, a lot of women think they have to take on this like new like 5K running habit. I had one mom who said, who's a friend, she's like, oh, I didn't get my workout in this morning because I didn't have a half hour. And I was like, there's no police that says you have to work out for a half hour before it counts. Like that means nothing. And in fact, studies have shown that if you just aim for a 7-minute workout or 10-minute workout, women who do that actually get more total time a week exercise than women who actually aim for 30 minutes at a time. Because you can do that.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
I can handle 7 minutes. I can squeeze that in. And so that's also how I started becoming a morning workout person. I would get the bright light and then I would just go work out for 7 minutes. I was like, I can do that. I didn't want to get up and run for 3 miles, even though I like running. I still didn't want to, but I could get up and run for like 7 minutes or run a mile for 10 minutes and then stop.
That reminds me of, do you remember 7-minute buns and 7-minute abs? You can do anything for 7 minutes. So
yes, you can.
Basically 7-minute abs and buns backs what you're saying right here.
Thank you. Well, if 7-minute buns backs what I'm saying,
it's
there
gold.
We go.
Yeah.
Now I'm good. And then over time, I did slowly, once it wasn't a big deal, and I did slowly increase. And now I do 3 miles in the morning at 5 or 5:30, and I'm done before the kiddos wake up, so I don't get that guilt trip.
How old are your kids again?
2 and 5. So I am so in the thick of it.
Oh my God, you have a 2 and a 5-year-old. So I'm thinking in my mind as you're talking, I'm like, you've got like a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old.
Oh no.
What time do your kids wake up?
Usually around 6. So except on a weekend, then it's more like 5.
Exactly. So then what time are you waking up in order to work out before them?
I wake up at around 5 or 5:30.
Okay.
If you're doing the bright light and getting up the same time every day, it hurts only for about, it does, I won't lie. None of this is like miracle fairy tricks. It takes a little bit of time to make a habit. And so it's hard the first week or definitely like the first couple of days. But after a while, your body really starts to reset. And then you get to pat yourself on the back all day long that you exercise.
Actually, that's such a good point, the patting the self on the back. Then you don't have to berate yourself.
No, things that tend to get bumped like exercise, just schedule them in before everybody's awake. That way it just gets done. Because otherwise as a mom, we don't have time. You don't have to do that 7 days a week. You can do that a couple days a week. I would say even on the days that you don't exercise in the morning, still try to get up around the same time, but maybe do something else you like reading or meditate or something so that you're not losing that early morning wake up time.
Right. Or use the bathroom alone. I mean, it could just be so simple.
Oh my God. Use the bathroom. How exciting is that?
Motherhood, it does this thing where all of a sudden the things that it takes to make you happy are so low. They're so base. Like my friend was telling me after she had her first, she was like, I just went out to the beach today and just stood there and it was euphoric. And it's just pre-kids in order to have fun. It was like, well, what fun people are we going to see and what cool place are we going to go? And now it's just going to the bathroom alone.
I remember the first time I went to Target after having my daughter.
Yes.
Oh my God. It was like, there's high moments in my life. Like the first time I went to Disney World, Buckingham Palace, Target after having a baby, things like that. It's amazing how things change for us.
It's funny too, because on one hand, I do joke about it because it's in some ways it feels like a little bit inhumane, but it also really honestly makes happiness so much more in reach because it's just the littlest things that give that to you. I mean, really for me, it's just being alone at all. I'm just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And that's something that I don't have to spend $2,000 on a vacation to alone. So,
but no, it's true. I think motherhood, I think it's interesting that you said you liked the resilience chapter the best. That one was my hardest to write. And I probably hated it the most while I was writing it because you always have when you're writing.
Yeah.
And you're a creative type. You have those low moments. You're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Yes.
But in the end, it kind of became one of my most favorite chapters. Maybe because I needed it the most. So
what else from other chapters are your faves?
Let's talk about nutrition. I talked about how I like when the hacks take decisions off of my plate.
Yes.
So if you look at the best research and behavioral research on people who we think of as having really great willpower and people who have lost lots of weight or made some big change, studies show that they actually don't have any more willpower than the rest of the people, but they have just changed their environment in ways so that they are challenging their willpower less. So here's one example. Let's say you have a bowl of M&Ms. If you compare the M&Ms bowl that's in reach versus if you take it and you put it so that there's one obstacle between you and the M&Ms, say you have to get up out of a chair, or say it's on a high shelf that you have to just pull over the stool, not a hard thing, but just pull over a single step stool to get it. You'll eat 70% less without using any more willpower. People who did this. You may remember the Google study. They also did the same. Google employees were eating too many M&Ms. They changed the M&Ms. They kept them free, but they took them from a clear container and put them in an opaque one. And in around 6 weeks, the 2,000 employees ate 3 million fewer calories of M&Ms.
How are we the dumbest species ever?
Seriously. I was reading these things. I was like, I really would like to think that I'm very intentional and deliberate about my whatever M&Ms or Cheez-Its eating. We're not. Monkey see, monkey eat. So the upside for that is like, oh, well, then if I just hide those things or put them up on a shelf, I won't be tempted. And it's true. A friend had texted me and she's like, oh my God, my kids went to school and I just ate half of their Halloween candy. And so I was like, put it up on a higher shelf. So you have to just move it so you have to get the stool. And she was like, that's not going to work. I'll just pull the stool. And I said, you may just try it. What's the harm? She called me like a month later and she's like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. I haven't had Halloween candy in a month and I wasn't even trying.
And you're like,
it works.
You're as dumb as the rest of us. You don't want to pull a stool out.
We're that lazy. So there's a lot of hacks. I'm like, how can I leverage my inherent laziness? Because I'm not going to try to fight us being less lazy. That's evolution. Let's not be absurd.
Right.
I think most wellness books are like, how can you fight laziness? And how can you fight yourself? And I'm like, forget that. You have enough on your plate. How can you leverage it?
Yes, I love this idea of taking decisions off of your plate. I remember there was an article, I think by Dr. Oz, I read a bunch of years ago that said something about, how many decisions we make every day. And I think it was just after I read that, I planned my outfits for the week so that every morning I didn't have to like figure out what to wear. And I need to go back to that because just that minor thing was like, it was like a gift to myself. It was like every time I went into my closet and I was like, what am I gonna, oh my God, I did myself a favor.
Yes.
Just like, so things like that, I absolutely love. And also like, aren't you bros with Dr. Oz? Is this a thing?
Bros. So Dr. Oz is wonderful. He has endorsed my book. He's been super supportive of me. So I've done his show a bunch of times and I'm just really grateful.
Aw,
grateful
that's
to him.
awesome.
So yes.
So bros.
Bros, yes.
Maybe I derailed you. On nutrition, you were talking about putting obstacles in between the thing and us.
Yes. That's a really easy way. There's some hacks that are just very actionable, very tactile. Go do this and arrange your pantry and it'll help. There's others in the nutrition about how to break the sugar habit. And again, instead of telling people just go head on and refuse that donut, which just makes you want to cry and like melt in a little puddle under your desk. Instead, it's like, well, you can't really refuse that donut because the way your brain is wired, if you are eating sugar all the time. So let's do it in a surreptitious way. Let's first take out the hidden sugar. Added sugar is in 74% of our food. So like if you're constantly eating a burger with ketchup and it has sugar on it, I can't tell your brain and tell you to refuse a donut. It's like you'll no more refuse that donut than you could if I said, I'll give you $10 million to hold your breath underwater for 10 minutes. You can't do it.
Right.
There's hacks in there about how to break the sugar habit. I'm obsessed with that because I had that problem with sugar as well.
Got it. And I love one of the things that you had in there that just like made me laugh out loud. There is an actual app that's like a financial penalty that, you set yourself up for here's the goal that I'm going to reach. And then when you don't, if you don't reach it, then it donates money to a cause that you despise. I feel
that
like
you don't like.
I would do whatever that thing said because I would be so angry to give money. And I can think of like specifically exactly who that money would go to. So like, did you use that? That's genius.
I have not used it. I do think it is genius though, because like if you think a lot of apps are like, well, you'll just lose money. I'm like, well, it's going to go to the Ronald McDonald House. Great. Okay. I'm going to go have a donut or I'm going to skip that workout. But if it's like going to a cause that you really viscerally despise, and you're like, no, I am going to go do it. There's a lot of let's make it easier to have you exercise and nutrition, but then let's also be realistic. You'll fall off the wagon. So if you need a little bit of a whip, here are some ways to do that too. We run the gamut.
You said something in your hacks about not making a special meal for a picky eater. Will you tell us more about that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So yes, there's a whole section in nutrition about getting your kiddos to eat and getting them to eat well. Kids and meals can be so stressful, right? And
yes.
Now my 5-year-old will pretty much and my 2-year-old, I'm sorry, will pretty much eat whatever I put in front of him. God bless him. He is just super not picky. My 5-year-old is definitely a little more independent, and she makes life a little bit harder. So I've had to do all of these kind of tricks with picky eaters. Number 1 is no separate meals. You are not a short order chef. The meal I make for dinner is the meal that she's having that's what everybody's having for dinner, and she can choose not to eat it. I think that's something that I've learned. She does not have to eat from every food group on there. She does not have to eat a little bit of everything. She may not eat it, but there's nothing else. And there's no opening the pantry. There is no cooking anything else. There's no side snacks later when she's hungry. This is dinner.
Okay, but so yes, I'm on board, except for in my head, I'm hearing just like incessant crying, because we have a similar thing that happens with my daughter on this. And so we'll tell her, this is dinner. This is all that you have. You know, when you're hungry later, there's going to be nothing. This is the meal that we eat. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, cut to a half hour, an hour later, and she's a complete wreck.
Really?
Yeah.
She's a complete wreck because she wants to eat.
Yeah. Because now all of a sudden she's hungry, and then she wants something different. And so then, you know, I'm always like, we said, you know, I'm like pretty adamant about it, but then she'll say something like, can I just have an apple? And then I'm like, well, an apple is healthy. And then I'm like, don't do it. Don't give in. Don't negotiate with a terrorist. And then, you know, she'll say, all I really want is just a delicious apple. And I'm like, God damn it, stop. Like it's just, you know, it's just like total mental warfare. Mm-hmm. So does your daughter, if you make something and she doesn't want it and she chooses not to have it, is that the end of it? And then she's just hungry but doesn't complain about it?
If she's hungry later, I'll be like, sure, there's carrots. And I'll say, like, there's food in the refrigerator.
Right.
So, and by food in the refrigerator, I don't mean no, mommy's not going to go heat back up dinner.
Right.
But there's carrots, there's some green beans. You're welcome to sugar snap peas or whatever you can have that.
Yes.
And that's what we do for snacks as well. There's food in the refrigerator, not food in the pantry.
Right.
And yes, it makes dinner difficult sometimes, but somebody be like, fine, cry. I'm just going to pour myself a glass of wine. And if they don't see you budge, they give in. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about an apple, but it's more that she's just making you crazy after dinner, and you don't want to be made crazy after dinner.
No, that's exactly. It feels like this manipulation that happens. I mean, sometimes I can tell when it's legitimately she's hungry and wants something different. And I always do that. Well, you can have a fruit or a vegetable. That's usually where I'll go. But then there's a part of me that's like, but this whole thing feels like terrorism.
Yeah, it feels like she's getting to eat on her schedule.
Right. And maybe that should be, you know, like, I don't know, just because it's 5:30 or 6, maybe that doesn't mean that her belly is hungry then. So
yeah, but I think it's really important to kind of stand your ground. And studies have shown, again, and as you saw in the book, that what you want to be with as a parent around meals is authoritative, not authoritarian, and not permissive. So authoritarian would say, this is the food, you need to eat all of it. You need to have a clean plate club. Yeah. No dessert until you eat everything. You know, these are the rules, and I choose what you eat. Authoritative is much more, I'll get her input on what we want to eat that night. So I will say, do you want green beans or broccoli as a side? You know, I'm not saying, do you want green beans or ice cream? Right. Their options are similar, but she gets a choice. She feels a little bit empowered. So you let them have input, but then the buck does stop.
What about dessert? What's your take on dessert?
What I tell my children is we eat everything. So everything includes ice cream, or everything includes pirate's booty, but it also includes carrots and peppers and beans and salmon and all of these other things, so that no food is off limits. Because as soon as it's off limits, you know, that's what you want.
Yeah, then they want it.
So it's not every night. It's a little treat, but whatever. It's fine.
Okay.
And it's not a reward for eating the other things, because then kids think that like eating beans is the work you have to do to get dessert.
I mean, are they wrong?
What I do find, if there is a certain food that they like are insisting on having every night, or it becomes kind of out of control, that's when adulting is fun, because you hold the American Express and you just don't buy it. And then it's not in the house. Done. End of discussion. No argument. Sorry, I don't have it.
Yeah.
Which of course to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, they'll still be like, why? I'm like, I physically don't have it. I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, because they think you can just make whatever, like from your hands, like a magician, just like, oh, and I have a whole pack of Oreos right here for you.
Exactly. Et voila. A couple things with parents to get your kids to eat more veggies. So one is give them a veggie first. Like, have your child be alone with a vegetable before dinner. So
that sounds hilarious.
It's very like all by myself.
Totally.
So while I am fixing dinner, I will give my children salad first. Then we have it with hummus or a dip or olive oil and balsamic vinegar. You take that moment when they're hungry and they don't have anything else to eat, and you're occupied doing something else. So it's very low pressure. You're not hovering over them. Are you going to eat that. I have gotten my daughter to eat cabbage this way because one time it was the only thing I had. So I played it super cool. I was like, it's delicious. She had never had cabbage before. And I went around the corner, I like secretly watched her. And for about a minute, she kind of pouted. And then she kind of shrugged her shoulders because she realized there was nothing else coming. And she started to eat it with hummus.
Oh.
And I was like fist pumping. So
Yes.
it really works. And also just offering variety and not giving up. A lot of time kids take 10 to 15 times of introducing a vegetable before they will and try to make it so they like it. So roasting with a little bit of salt on there, just a tiny bit, brings out the sweetness. So broccoli, green beans, all of those, my kids really love them roasted and it's super easy. Again, like anything, it's not going to be a miracle change overnight, but you will be surprised by what your kids can do when you just offer that to them and when that's the only option.
Yeah. One of the things that you had in the book was a contingency plan. Will you explain what contingency plans are and how they're helpful?
Yes. Somewhere along this time, we've been talking about how we try to set up our environments to make it easier, but then let's be real, we all fall off the wagon or we're all faced with temptation. So contingency plans say, what are your things where you tend to sit down and eat a box of Oreos? What are those? Let's identify them right now and let's now find some other alternatives that you can do so that when you're there in that moment, you don't have to think of what else you can do because you can't think in that moment when all you're like, Oreos now, but you have the plan in place. And maybe part of the contingency plan is not keeping them in the house. When you're watching TV, we're not paying attention to how much we're eating. And then it's like, oh, entire bag, chips gone. How did that happen? So instead say, okay, what's the contingency plan? Maybe for some people, it's like, well, instead of watching TV, I'm going to read because that doesn't trigger me to eat. Or maybe it's, well, I'm watching TV. I'm going to do my nails because I can't do nails and eat chips. Or I'm going to put the chips in a smaller bowl and pour out just a smaller serving. So the next night when you're stressed out and you just want to sit down and watch some television, you're not having to sit there, think of a plan B.
Right.
Whatever your triggers are, figure out what are some ways around them.
Yeah, I have a friend who knits at night to keep her hands busy.
Yes.
And so it's funny because every day she'll come to school and she's like, oh, I've got a hat for somebody. It's like we're all getting hats.
Very productive. Yeah. And you can do it for exercise too. Like when you have those days that you don't feel like exercising or work took too long or the kid is sick. It's the contingency plan is your plan B.
Yeah. Right.
It just acknowledges that we all have those days that happen. So you say, what are the top 2 to 3 things that usually trip me up? How can I problem solve for them right now when I'm not in the middle of them?
Yeah, that's so smart. I think my favorite hack that you had in there is don't multitask. Thank you for saying that. I hate multitasking. And I feel like when I became a mom, all of a sudden you're supposed to like, I can iron a shirt and I can nurse the baby and I can also stir the pot. And it's this visual in my mind of a good mom who can do all of these different
It's like
things.
a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Like you're supposed to do all these things. No, so this came from the ER because in the ER, you could be very tempted to multitask and handle 5 different things at once. But science really shows that we are not good multitaskers.
Yeah.
We think we are, but our brains don't actually hold 2 things in our active brain at once. We just are really ping-ponging back and forth. When you're multitasking, it burns more energy and it shoots your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, through the roof. The higher our stress levels are, that itself is a risk factor for packing on more pounds in the abdominal area. So whenever I see a woman and she's like, I can't get rid of my belly fat, I'm like, what's your stress level and how much sugar do you eat? Because those 2 things together have this like super synergistic effect to pack on the pounds.
Interesting.
Even when they looked at 2 groups of women who ate the exact same calories, those with higher stress levels had larger waist circumference, had more belly fat. So that's why there's so much in the book about breaking that sugar habit and breaking the stress, because you got to come at it. You can come at it from either angle, but eventually from both.
Right.
And also BTW, if that's not enough bad news about multitasking, when you multitask, it takes 15 minutes actually to get back to the same level of focus in the first task when you interrupt it. So instead, what I want people to do, I want them to start single tasking. So it seems like it's going to take longer, but it really doesn't because of all those things we talked about of how multitasking actually takes longer. So single tasking, that means like you literally are doing one thing at a time. It'll mean that you're also like, if you're trying to do that work email, you're less likely to voice dictate into the work reply all email, like Jimmy, stop licking your sister's face,
Right.
You know, whatever you're trying to do.
Yes.
So single task. I had to do this when I was writing the book because I'd be writing the book and then I'd be like, ooh, Nordstrom, 15% off shoe sale. And then I'd be over here looking at shoes and I'm like,
it's almost like we have to rewire ourselves a little bit to do that.
We do.
To just focus on one thing. All of us, especially in this day and age with smartphones and whatnot, is you go into the kitchen, you're doing something, somebody sends you a text, you read the text, you go do the thing on your way to you respond to the text, you see something else, and we spend like our whole day like this. So
It's exhausting.
it sounds like it's about really going, okay, no, I came here to do this one thing and I'm going to finish that. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to reply to this text. But I know when I try to do that, when I'm like, no, I'm not going to let this happen. It's so hard to hold on to the reins on that because I'm so used to being pulled so many directions.
Right. Because we've trained our brain. So you really have to rewire it. So when you're writing your blog post or something else, it is literally saying, I'm going to turn off and block all my phone except for a call from my husband or my babysitter. Those are the only two they can get through. Like that's number one. Turn off your email, turn off your text, turn off everything just for a half hour even, work on that project. Number two, I think, again, in today's 24/7 day and age, it's easy, like you said, just respond to the text or anything else. I set my phone away at the end of the day when I'm going to go hang out with my kids. I finish work for the day. I go, then I spend the next 3 hours with them. We play, we have dinner, I put them to bed, and then I'll pick up my phone again.
Right.
And I'll look at it and I'll check my emails, but I'm not doing it during that interim because I know I'll get pulled into the rabbit hole, or I'll see that text and then I'll forget to go back and reply to it.
Right.
The first time you go to the bathroom without taking your phone and reading something and you just go, or you wait in line and you just kind of are present. It opens up brain space for you.
I read about there's a place, I believe it's in Korea, where it's a prison, but it's a quote unquote prison. Forget what it's called. It's something like prison of the self. And people pay to go there and they have a cell and you have to give them your cell phone. The only thing you get is you get an outfit and you get like a teapot and teacups. And you have this room that has, a window and you put yourself in for however many days that you want to be in there. And you basically disconnect.
That sounds like torture.
I know. It kind of like the people they looked pretty mellow because I would imagine for the first couple hours, you're like, why did I do this? This is crazy. But you just check out of that modern life. And so it's just funny that we're at the place where these things now exist.
Yeah. How funny is it that we're like, I need to spend $1,000 for an iPhone. Now I need to go spend $10,000 to have somebody lock up my iPhone. It's like PayPal.
It's so silly. Oh my gosh. You just had me think of a new business idea. I'll go to people's houses and lock up their phone for way less than $1,000. Sort of related to all this, since you're an ER doc, what is harder, being an ER doc or being a mom?
Different. I think as an ER doctor, you feel a lot, your patients are your family or your children or to a certain extent. And so there's sometimes that you would never yell at your patients, but you would totally yell at your children. But then I remember also the flip side being in residency and having to wake up in the middle of the night and being so tired of, at least when it's your children, like they're cute and you can go and you can smooch them and it's kind of considered taboo to go smooch your patients. Right. So it's a little bit easier in the middle of the night because it's your kids and you kind of like still like I get to see. Like part of me is like, please stay in bed. Right. There's a little part that's like, but I get to squeeze you.
Right. But I feel like with an ER, like you have a shift that ends. But with motherhood, you don't have a shift that ends.
Yes. When I was in residency, you could go do a 36-hour shift, but it ended. And then I would go home and I would put in my earplugs and I would close my light blocking curtains and I would sleep for 10 hours or 8 hours. And you don't get to do that as a mom. One of the big things in the ER that you learn is that your patients and your nurses and your staff, everybody kind of looks to you to set the tone. And that's very similar to being a mom. So if you freak out and you panic about something, everybody does.
Right.
As a mom, of course, we all have moments when we're crying and our children see us crying. Right. And I think that's fine. But for the most part, you do have to try to set the tone. And so that was really useful for me as an ER doctor.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine all the stuff that you have to see as being somebody who has gone to the ER, because I have all these weird health things that always get me. I'm always like, what have you people seen in here? You've seen the weirdest shit, I'm sure.
You see a little bit of everything. You see the truth of humanity. Yes.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes.
What do you see as the difference between adjusting to motherhood and actual postpartum depression? Because I feel like there's a really fine line here with how motherhood is today, modern motherhood, and all the things that it expects of us and how much it's sort of not valued, what we go through to become mothers and all of this sort of thing. So I feel like it's hard to tell what's just the like, oh my God, holy shit, this is motherhood. Like I'm up all night feeding a baby. What is actual response to that? And what is something different, which is like postpartum depression? In your experience, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm really glad you covered this because there's a stigma around this. And the more we talk about it, the more we share the commonality of it, I think is really important. So there's baby blues. blues, which is kind of what you're talking about. It's that transition. Other people have called it kind of matrescence. They liken it to adolescence. So at its most minimal, it's more like, it could be like adolescence, which is not a comfortable time. There's the emotions and acne and all that stuff. Every mom goes through that. Now, other statistics shed that 80% of moms feel baby blues. And I would argue that the other 20% who said no were probably just like too tired. They didn't read the question. Because pretty much most moms that I know have some amount of baby blues, which can be sometimes like crying for no apparent reason or mood swings and just feeling anxious or feeling overwhelmed. That's typical. And the baby blues really are compounded, all of them, by sleep deprivation. So just a quick PSA on that. I remember being in residency and my coffee had spilled, which was really no big deal because it was just like a couple of drops. But I started bawling. Like I was sobbing my eyes out. And I remember saying to my professor, like, I don't even know why I'm crying. And she said, of course you do. So sleep deprivation is a form of torture. They use it to break people. And it was a light bulb. So then when I was a new mom, and I was feeling that way, I was like, oh, it's not because I'm crazy. It's not because I'm a bad mom. I'm just so sleep deprived. So I'm allowed to feel this way, but it has nothing to do with my child or my husband or my house or anything other than sleep. But then there's really postpartum depression. And that's about anywhere from 8 to 15% of women. We don't really know because women, a lot of them don't tell anybody.
And sometimes the screening for that is awful. I recently just went to my gynecologist and they have like an iPad that was like, how many times a week do you feel like you can't live your life or you can't do it all or whatever? Whatever I answered in that, there was like 10 questions my doctor did not even bring up to me. And so I feel like either it's not being seen or the way that the questions are phrased are confusing. I don't know.
Yeah. Or they seem really extreme. So everyone's like, well, I'm not that bad, so I'm not going to check on this. Baby blues come up out of the blue and then they kind of go away on their own. Postpartum depression doesn't. And that it tends to happen most days. So a woman, if she's kind of feeling depressed or tearful most days or kind of hopeless or loss of interest in her baby or she can't sleep, and then all, of course, the thought of death or harming herself or anything, all of those are signs of postpartum depression. Notice they are not signs of being a good mom or a bad mom. All of that needs to be removed from any part of the discussion. It has nothing to do with
it has nothing to do with how much you love your child. It has nothing to do with what kind of mother you are.
Not in the least. And so everybody can get moments of that. And so studies have shown that women typically do not share these feelings unless they're explicitly asked about their feelings. Like you mentioned, they didn't ask the exact question of how I was feeling. So I said, no, that's typical. And so you have a lot of women who are struggling with things, but since they weren't specifically asked, they didn't want to share it. Maybe they didn't think they should share it. Maybe they thought it was a judgment on them.
Another thing that I'm curious your professional opinion, I noticed this thing, and I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a birth doula for about 10 years and taught childbirth education.
Cool.
Yeah. So I would see people become mothers and help them through that journey. So I've worked with a lot of families over the past 10 years. And I hate that I see this, but I feel like after women have a few kids, like when their oldest is like 5 or so, I notice, and this is with a lot of my friends as well, women tend to get these mystery illnesses and these autoimmune things going on. And to me, I look at it and I think they are worn out from motherhood. Like this is part of that kind of what got you to write your book, which is really, this is what we're going to accept. This is how it's going to be. Do you notice that women on their second kid, kind of 5 years in, something around there, are all of a sudden finding themselves with autoimmune diseases? Is that something you've seen?
I see a lot of women with kids around that age and they just feel awful. I don't have a title for what it is. I tend to call it the chronic stress disequilibrium because the one thing that they all tend to have is just a very high levels of chronic stress, which is what I had when I developed my autoimmune arthritis. And I kind of joke that that's going to be my next book, is like trying to figure out exactly what that is and what to do about it. And is it, like I mentioned to you, is it the chronic stress that they're facing? So it's part of it is just learning how to deal with that, different tools that we're really not taught how to do, but then looking at your diet, clearing away those things that really feed into the vicious cycle and reversing that cycle. A lot of the hacks in this book will do that, but it's not just focused on that because that is something that I'm really curious about. I have not seen enough evidence to tell me what it is.
Right.
and I want to know more. And I feel like that's something important to try to solve.
I just keep feeling like the way that modern motherhood is and what's expected of us and the framework and the lack of help. I mean, this whole self-care thing that just drives me nuts, which is people who refuse to help saying you should just do more. And then the other broken systems around us. I rage about our public school system that my kids go to, like my daughter in kindergarten. It's at the point where when I signed her up at the beginning of the year, there were 42 volunteer slots for one class of 31 children. God. And I'm like, isn't this stuff happening? Like, why do we need parents to do this? So at our school, the parents come in and they teach the centers and they do all of these other little things that it's crazy. So I think to myself, okay, so we have a broken system. And instead of fixing that system, we then put it on top of the women who are already tired from a broken system. So we have women who are helping tired women, teachers mostly, to give their kids a better education. And then we wonder why all these moms have fibromyalgia and Hashimoto's and adrenal things going on. And I just think that there's so many different pieces of it. And I think that the broken systems that can put on us is part of it too. Like even our food supply, the fact that our food supply is so toxic.
Yes.
When we go to the store, it's like we're up against all the terrible foods that want to make it into our basket and into our home and our kids' bodies. I think about my mom and I think about when she parented in the 70s. They never questioned that. At least my mom didn't ever question that. And I think, of course, your cortisol levels were low, Mom.
Right.
Because you were feeding us Squeeze-Its. But these days, we know better. It's almost like we know too much. But also, if we don't do better, we are facing epidemics across the board.
We are. And moms, you're right. It's on so many levels. You have all these higher expectations of all the stuff we're supposed to do. It's a losing battle against the big food. Like I said in the book, big food companies spend millions of dollars doing brain scans to figure out what's the perfect recipe that you really can't eat just one. So how do we find our ways around it? And that's, again, I talk about in the book, like how do we go back a little bit to like that caveman, cavewoman environment that our bodies evolved to thrive in? It's just the last 100 years, the environment suddenly changed. Our bodies have not evolved in our responses to stress, our responses to food, our responses to light and how it changes how we sleep. And all of these things are tied together. There was a study out of Harvard and they took people and all they did was screwed with their sleep. They woke them up at 10 p.m. They woke them up at 2 in the morning, all these things. After about 9 days, a third of them would have tested positive for pre-diabetes. 9 days.
Jeez.
So it makes me wonder how many of my patients with pre-diabetes, if I actually just followed them around at their home and made sure they got sleep on a regular basis, would it reverse? Like, is it really that easy? It's everything you're talking about and trying to help give moms the tools so that you're not in this cage match. Of your willpower versus what you know you should do versus your cravings. How can you change it to make that more possible and give moms the tools? So I want to dive into it maybe on the next book, but it's all in there for this one.
Yeah. I so appreciate your take on things and just even your desire to want to make things easier for moms that isn't telling them that they should do everything themselves. I love the ideas that you have about making it easier, but removing certain obstacles and then also working with our own bodies, how they want to be working instead of fighting against it. I think that's brilliant. And I also love how the book is in bite-sized chunks. So somebody gets the book and they can't read the whole thing. That's fine. They can just delve in and look in a certain section or read whatever.
Yes.
I love that.
There may be some people who read it from start to finish and then they'll get a lot more of the science and the background behind it. But for those who don't have the time, just the table of contents is very clear and very detailed for a reason. So you can go to the section you want, say, this is where my biggest pain point is today. I'm just going to work on this. And the whole point is that if all you do is one hack, you will feel better. And this was an awesome interview. It was so much fun to do it with you. We get so much pressure from moms to be perfect, and we forget that what we're doing is really good enough. Our kids don't need us to be perfect.
Yeah.
They just need you to love them and be mommy.
That's right. Give us places that we can find you and we can find your book.
Yes. I'd love people to follow and comment and let me know what they want to hear more from because I love that engagement. On social, I'm at Dr. Darria. So DRDARRIA. That's 2 R's in Darria. On Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you'll find the same handle. And my website is drdarria.com. And of course, mom hacks you can find on my website if you go to the homepage or on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. We are on Audible.
Oh, awesome. Dr. Darria, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and to give some insights. I so appreciate you.
Thank you, Brandy. This was absolutely a pleasure.
as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for the outpouring of messages and kind words about the podcast. I'm thrilled that you guys are enjoying it. So please don't forget to review or rate it on iTunes. And if you want to support a mom and her side gig, you can throw a few bucks my way on Patreon to cover my podcast costs like childcare, equipment, online hosting. So if you go to Patreon, you can join the likes of my very own mother and become a patron of the Adult Conversation podcast at www.patreon.com/adultconversation. Honestly, anything helps me justify doing this in my quote unquote free time. So thank you guys. Until next time.
Here I